Welcome to Fables of Our Deconstruction, a podcast where we examine our systems of faith and culture together as we grow as people. I'm your host, Dylan. If you like what you hear, be sure to check me out at patreon.com/Dylan. If you'd like to be on a future episode, leave me a message over at 515-318-7569 or find Fables of Our Deconstruction on Anchor FM and send me a voice message. If you want your name shared, include it in your message, otherwise I'll keep you anonymous. Now let's deconstruct. All right, so we're back talking about different arguments in favor of a god. I want to remind you that I'm willing to talk about a lot more than this, and I've got some ideas for future episodes because we're getting close to the end of the major list of arguments for the existence of a deity. And this one I have been kicking back and avoiding and pushing back for a while now, which I want to apologize. That's really not helpful to the goal that we have here. I pushed it back the last couple of weeks, and I'm even a day late on recording this. This will be going out on time day wise, but usually it's out at 7 in the morning, and it's almost 2 p.m. on Wednesday, the 16th of March, which is the due date for this episode. So, what is the argument we're discussing today? It is defined as the Kalam Cosmological argument. Now, this is a deep argument. There are numerous uh, articles you can read on it, even scholarly ones. There are uh, theological educators that write about this in their graduate work. As a matter of fact, I found a thesis from 2013 by an individual named Curtis John Metcalf from the University of Missouri St. Louis, which to me is amazing. Um, so the Kalam cosmological argument is dense. That's why I'm referencing someone else's work. The piece that you can check out is once again a graduate thesis. It's 34 pages long, so we're not going to go through it, page by page. But it really breaks down some of the various parts of the Kalam. And I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with it. So, what I want to do is read the abstract from Curtis's piece because he's a theologian, and I think this would be a good place to start. So, big quotes. William Lane Craig is the most recognizable contemporary defender of the Kalam cosmological argument. The argument, in its simplest form, is 1. Whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. 2. The universe began to exist. And 3. Therefore, the universe has a cause for its existence. In defending this argument, he claims that that it presupposes the theory of time commonly referred to as the A theory of time, which is roughly the view that time really does flow from the non existent future into the present and then out of existence into the past. Though this may be the common sense view of time, it is not the view held by many philosophers and physicists. Because Craig's argument relies on a controversial view of time, the argument, in my view, carries an unnecessary burden of proof on behalf of the A theory. My thesis then is to argue the support of the Kalam cosmological argument, but is to argue in support of the Kalam cosmological argument, but also to argue against Craig's claim that it must be dependent on A theory of time. So we're going to set aside the A theory that time comes from the future into the present and then it retreats into the past. That's a whole deal that we could discuss. But I think I agree with Curtis here. The A theory lacks a foundation of evidence because we can't really retrieve evidence from the future. So even though he disagrees with William Lane Craig, who often is considered the champion of the Kalam, he still agrees that the Kalam is something worth arguing in favor of. And that's why I think this paper is interesting, because it's from somebody who is able to compete with the Kalam cosmological argument while also agree with parts of it, because clearly the Kalam has a lot going on. So let's take those three parts that we had before, the ones that specifically define the Kalam as removed from time, and look at it the way we are. I mean, when I say removed from time, we're only going to be able to be so removed, right? Because we're talking about the beginning of the universe. So let's start with this. Number one, whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. Whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. That's a great point. It seems, at least from the human perspective, that anything that exists has a cause. I exist because my parents chose to have sex, right? And there's a lot of becauses behind that, like how did they come together, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like we can extrapolate that to the beginning of life, but we don't have a clear grasp on what causes life. We don't know, is it molecules that eventually become so much matter that eventually the matter realizes itself? We don't know what flips those triggers, right? So it's better to say we don't know for that, but we do know that pretty much everything we have has a cause of its existence. Okay, so maybe we can reasonably agree with premise one. Premise two, the universe began to exist. Now, when we look at the contemporary concept of a Big Bang, the most agreed upon plausible concept for the beginning of the universe, we have a completely dense, as minute as possible, point of mass that erupted, right? We still have measurable background radiation and noise from this event. We can track it and its repercussions. So we can still measure what happened, kind of like measuring through the different layers of soil to determine what when something laid down, when something died, when something um, flooded an area, whatever matter came to be in a particular striation of soil, we can tell based on how much is laid down over time. That's what I meant to say. So we can measure the effects of what we call the Big Bang still, because there's still noise and sound from it, right? And we like to say, especially in just colloquial speak, that that's the beginning of the universe, right? But what I think is interesting here is the claim, the premise for this part is that the universe began to exist. And so, what I want to say is, we don't necessarily know that it began to exist. We don't really have a finite grasp on all of the workings of the Big Bang and exactly how it took place. We have theories that become more and more rooted the more we test them. However, none of them approach a point where we can say, this is the best. This is evidentially the most likely true piece, because we have ones that are best and better, but we're always trying to approach that most evidently true piece. So it's possible, because I don't know if it's impossible, but it's possible that the universe has always been in some form, or that it's possible that the universe will collapse back into a small little point and then repeat, and then that could just be repeating all the time, like a rubber band snapping out and snapping in, and snapping out and snapping in, but we don't know. So I think premise two, that the universe began to exist, is one of the harder ones to actually accept. We don't necessarily know that it began to exist, and that also implies that if if the Big Bang began with a singularity where all mass and matter is compressed so tight, there's nothing but just one dense spot, that would imply that there is no such thing as time yet. And so, yeah, the beginning would be the beginning of time, but there would be nothing before it, so we don't really have a. It becomes extremely measurable. It becomes more of an I don't know, and I'm not even a physicist. I'm just talking out my ass, really, because I know what I know from you know, exploring physicists, listening to people like Neil deGrasse Tyson talk, listening to other other individuals in the atheist community talk. Excuse me, I'm losing my train of thought because I want to make sure I grasp this, and that's why I'm not going to edit this episode. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to fall. I want you to know that I'm human, just like you. But there's still things to question in the Kalam. Premise two: the universe began to exist. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have a lot of evidence. So let's go to premise three. Therefore, the universe has a cause for its existence. So we also don't know that. This wraps back to premise one. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, right? Like I said, it feels that way. We seem to have, A leads to B leads to C and so on infinity. It seems to be that way that two creatures mating makes another, and that's the cause for that one's existence. Several pieces come together and we have a sandwich, and that's the cause for its existence. But we don't really know anything more about our universe than we already have. And so, from my understanding, there could be a cause, and it could be something natural, and that whatever's beyond that cause, if there's something literally outside the universe, if there's like a big blank white space with lots of like little black specks that are multiple universes all over it, there could be something in its laws of physics that put universes into place. There's concepts and ideas that perhaps black holes suck in matter and spit it out somewhere else, maybe a white hole, some other spot. Maybe it's just matter filtering in and out of one place to another. How matter gets there, I'm not entirely sure. But the thing is even if there's a cause, the Kalam argues the cause is a god. We don't know that. And the thing is I don't have evidence to say it isn't a god. But I don't think saying cause simply because there must be a cause means it's a god. Because one, we don't know that there must be a cause because we haven't entirely deconstructed what took place with what we call the Big Bang. So we're not entirely sure. And from that, if we ever did know and we could define or understand a cause, it doesn't necessarily mean the thing that we'll be able to define will be God. We're working in the realm of I don't know. And one of the things that I think is beautiful about trying to determine the origin of the universe, the origin of life, even just the origin of the planets around us, is that there's a lot of questions. And if you think those questions are beautiful, they're worth exploring. And I think things like the Kalam are challenging because they give us room to rest on our laurels, to say, well, I know the answer. It's because God. I think that's kind of a shame. It might feel good to just say it's God. Move on with your life. Let's go get a cheeseburger. Apparently, I'm hungry. But the thing is, if we just assume we know, that doesn't leave us a whole lot of room for discovery to actually go and find out. And we are, as a species, constantly conflicted with ourselves. And these conflicts arise in ways like we see in Ukraine right now. And we might never get to know the answer if we wipe ourselves out. However, there are people on the other end of that conflict who would rather set aside our disagreements and learn reasons and find these potential causes. There's a chance we'll live to know the answer. And my question for someone like William Lane Craig or Curtis Metcalf, who wrote this paper, is really, if we live to see the day where a cause is determined, and the cause is without God, will you move the flagpole again? And is this really just the biggest ardent defense of the God of the Gaps possible? Does this move the gap so far away that it's harder for us to conceive? And so God's safer in that gap because discovery is further away. Because at any given moment, we could give up this search. At any given moment, we could make grand mistakes and end everything and never find the answer. Therefore, this gap is so removed, we might not find it. Therefore, it's easier to rest and just say it's God. That gap is God. But my question for these people who think that the Kalam is the best route, the best evidence or argument for God, is let's just say you're wrong. I'm not saying you are because I have no evidence to say that. But if you are wrong, did your God shrink? Are you going to find a new way to move the gap as far away as possible again? Or are you willing to join us and just say, I don't know? Maybe it is a God. Maybe we'll find that, but I don't think it's necessary to say that it is evidence. So that's a lot to say. I think that was maybe the thickest 15 minutes I've given you so far. I'm excited to say that there's a lot of new stuff coming. We're wrapping up March. I've got a lot of events coming in March or not in March, in May, April and May. I've lost all track of myself clearly, but I've got a lot coming up and going on, and I'm looking at taking apart parts of the Bible. I've seen Hemet Meta do this over on his YouTube, and I think it's awesome. So I think we should join the Friendly Atheist in discussing parts of the Bible. Um, Unless I get a bunch of your calls in and you want to talk about the things you believe in and why. If we get those in, we'll focus on some of those for a while. But I think one of the next things we're going to do is sort of start to deconstruct the Bible because it's been almost 20 years since I've read through any of it, and I think it's time. So thanks for being here. This has been Fables of Our Deconstruction. Fables of Our Deconstruction is created by me, Dylan Jacobson. Don't forget, leave a like and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also support me and all of my work and join my community, the Brimstone Order, at patreon.com/Dylan. And remember, you're never alone. We are in this together.